We're on site with £38 million worth of delivery, 70 units, flats and houses. And there was a real turning point. We bought a block of 14 flats, 1.5. We spent 400k on it and revalued at 3.5 million quid. And that took the same amount of time and resource as an end of terrace new build. One house that we made probably 50k. Our competitive advantage isn't new build ground up unless we've taken it through planning. We've always been good at finding deals. The challenge has been planning. At the end of the day, it's slow. It's not pragmatic. I look at three metrics with every project. So in Aparo, Central Suites, SME Property, and that is
Before we get into this episode, I just wanted to thank all of the people that have recently subscribed to our channel. We've had a lot of growth and comments and feedback recently, and they've all been super positive. All those comments, all those shares, all those likes, all those subscribes really help the channel grow. Please do check out our sponsors, and we look forward to growing with you. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Property People. Today I am joined by the fantastic Mr. Jack Jiggens. How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you.
Good to have you back with us. This is the second time that you've been on Property People, and you're the second person to be on for the second time, and the first person to be on the second time was your business partner, Ben Richards. So I'm very, very thankful to have you back. I say at the end of most episodes that I always enjoyed the conversation. It'd be great to have you back, and you are both the people that have been my first choice to have back since we started doing all of these. Your last episode was episode 23. So what I don't want to do is talk about, who were you at school and all those sorts of things, which I always ask, because they can go and check out that episode. But a brief recap, because lots have happened in the last 2 years. And you are a third-generation property developer with years of exposure, experience behind you, and you have a partner, Ben Richards, in XP Property, which is a development business. You've started XP Surveys, which we're going to talk about as well. You've also a owner of Central Suites, a co-living platform based out in Oxfordshire, which we're going to talk about some portfolio building and stuff that I'm personally interested in. And as well as that, you've done some social housing stuff, which has been really interesting. And that's hit some crazy 8-figure kind of end values already. So with all of that, I think it's just a good idea to start with where we were like 2 years ago and kind of how that journey's come along over the last 2 years. And specifically, I think if we were to start with a few of the companies, Central Suites. This is one of the ones that I'm kind of like, I think it's kind of like my type of thing in terms of the investment development. I've been doing this stuff for 20 years, and it's always been sub 1 million. Obviously there's risk, but it's hard for it to go very, very wrong. And I know you're doing some racier stuff. So let's start with the Central Suite stuff that I can get my head around and get excited about as well.
It's a warm up. Well, you've definitely upped your game since 2 years ago from the podcast perspective. So Central Suites was born, I guess you could say, when I was stood in my kitchen at university. So I was in a 6-bedroom, 2-bathroom HMO. I went to Oxford Brookes, so technically I've never left Oxfordshire. And I was talking to my housemate about, I couldn't believe the margin that the owner was making. We were running the numbers ourselves in the kitchen. I was like, I wouldn't mind a bit of that myself. And so that was where the idea came from. And then my brother, who I run Central Suites with, went to Bristol, and he lived in a HMO and sort of went through a similar sort of thought process. We were saying, did you have mold in your bay window? Did you have to share with 6 other people a kitchen, a bathroom? And he was like, yes. I was like, was it shit? He was like, yes. And what we couldn't understand is I would have paid more for a better product, 100%. And my brother was the same. But there wasn't a good product out there, and the good product went quickly. So there's demand for good product out there, which I don't think comes at a huge cost in comparison to the rental rate you're getting per bed, classic HMO co-living model. So fast forward another sort of 5-6 years, I've flipped a few houses. I'm sort of back into construction because I did a small gig in a sales office. And I was basically a glorified builder. At what I call an accidental developer, buying a bungalow, knocking it down and building a new house and selling it and doing 1 project a year. And that's around the sort of time I met Ben. I wanted to scale. I wanted to do 5 projects a year. At that moment in time, I thought that would be 5 individual new build houses where we bought 5 bungalows and be off the tools because I was on the tools. And met Ben, and we had similar goals, similar aspirations. We got on like we were friends, but we had alternative skill sets that we could offer to the business. And at that time, my brother had finished uni. He's younger than me. He's 5 years younger than me. Moved to work for a portfolio landlord, you could call it, who scaled service accommodation and HMO from basically like 3 units to 40 within a very short period of time.
Wow.
And I said to my brother, I was like, we should just grow a HMO portfolio. I love the model. It's high cash flowing, which helps us grow. It's good cash flowing in the sense that your rents are normally higher than your costs. In a development company, that's not consistent.
Yeah.
And it's building an asset base, which is a lot easier to do with those high cash flowing assets than it is a buy-to-let property that you're finishing as a block of 14 flats, for an example, in XP Property. So we knew that we liked the concept. We built a business plan, but what we wanted to achieve was to negate all of the concerns that we had as tenants. So USB sockets in every bedroom, treating every tenant that their bedroom is not just a bedroom, it's their home. So additional storage, thinking about the layouts, thinking about the practicality, working from home desk, and then moving into the communal areas, focusing really more on like a co-living model than just a HMO, however many beds we can fit in. And we've scaled that portfolio up now in predominantly Oxfordshire. And it's been good fun, and it's been easy in the sense that I know property, I know the construction part. We had to skill up, predominantly my brother, on the lettings management, compliance, fire compliance, and the sort of detailed management. We've also gone a step further, and we've thought about the product as a whole, a service. We're almost like a subscription-based model. You pay when you're there, you don't when you leave. We do charge a bit of a premium. Our average room rate's about $875. So we're buying 3-bedroom houses for $350, spending about $100K or on average about $20K per bed, refinancing, normally pulling out most or the majority of the money on a bricks and mortar valuation. We don't like rent-based valuations.
Yeah.
And maybe we can go down that rabbit hole shortly. And our rule of thumb is 2 rooms pay the mortgage, 1 room pays the bills, and then if it's a 5-bed, 2 a profit, or 3 a profit if it's a 6-bed. We started with our own money, and we've grown for investors to come on board. And you mentioned of late the portfolio builder. The portfolio builder was sort of born because there's so much work that we've put into the product, the website, the service, the systems, the processes, the infrastructure, the team, the experience, that we now charge for a project, and it's the same as the last one with its quirks, and we don't lose that much efficiency leakage. So that, to me, is a scalable business. But the limitation is our money, because we can only do so much with our capital. So we're actually limited by our capital rather than our capabilities.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, in my opinion, to raise capital on just debt. Most people want tangible, if they're in the asset class of real estate, they want an asset that's there, that they can see, that they can have a charge on, that they can walk around if they want to. Some don't need to. So the portfolio builder is essentially, when I say it was launched this year, we've marketed it this year. We've actually already been doing it for 3 years with one partner,
right?
Where he basically runs quite a complex business, super successful. He's the key man in that business, and his business knows that, and his family know that. And he sort of said, if I just give you some money, will you build a portfolio? I'm happy to share it with you. And that's how it was actually born. But how we're marketing it is opening that out to, a few select partners that we want to grow with. The partner part is really important for us, because we've dealt with landlords, we've dealt with, stakeholders that we don't enjoy working with, and we're not doing this for necessarily all monetary value. There's got to be, enjoyable workmanship and partners that we really want to grow and scale with. So we've opened that out. Well, I think we're probably going to start with 3 partners. We believe that we can deliver another 6 to 15 houses this year. And then with that, income, we will then put that back into the business to see if we want to take that a step further, but it will all depend on our existing client base.
It's an incredible feat to be able to find deals in the way that you do. And I think that that's definitely, looking from the outside in, one of your personal brilliant skill sets is being able to identify deals. And there's so many people that, can't find a deal or can't find something that stacks up, and they're looking. What is it that you do that you feel... are you finding these deals on the market? Are they off market? Are they through auctions? Are they through estate agents? Are you using sourcing agents? What is it that you're so confident that you can find those deals? And I know how prolific you are across the multiple businesses in finding these deals. What is it that you think is the secret to your success?
I could probably talk an hour on acquisitions, because that's in Central Suites, that's my role, and in XP Property, that's my role. And it's something that I feel that I'm bad at a lot of things, whether it come to, professional meetings on site or design or whatever it may be. That stuff's too fluffy for me, and I just get to it. I love creating deals. So I think that's something that I, one, enjoy, two, have naturally either developed skills in that space, and I'll talk about where that might have come from, but or naturally being born with it. And then I had 2 years of sales experience in a sales office, and that's all about building your pipeline, chasing the lower hanging fruit, valuing your time, so not wasting your time on stuff that is pie in the sky and could get you distracted. And I think those metrics combined enable us to build the pipeline that we have. And to put that in perspective for listeners, we've actually, in the last 7 years, bought something every 4 weeks. That's our existing churn. And I think I did some stats on it the other day. I think I've put out about 1,000 offers in 7 years. And that hasn't become from me. I am a workaholic, so I do burn the sort of early oil and night oil and everything in between. But that's not necessarily just from sheer graft. There's a lot of that's from that. But getting more efficient every time you do something. Yeah. By the time you get to 1,000, I can put out and structure an offer way quicker than most of my competitors, if not all of the competitors in Oxfordshire, because it's obviously quite quiet out there. But where I think some of that skill has come from is sales, like progressing your best shots and making sure that you're analysing that. So when a lead comes in, grading the lead, then quantifying, spending your time on which leads first, then quantifying on margins, pricing, is there any additional value that could be added in it? But while I'm doing all this, I'm always thinking, what's the least amount of time I can spend on this every time? And what can I do now to make the next one quicker? That's one. And that helps with what I call market fog, when you get so much to look at, you don't know which deal to look at, and you sort of get a bit struck in headlights. I've never had that, because every time we've been refining, I've never been in a position where I don't know which one to spend my time on.
You've got that system, yeah. Basically, you said, I remember you telling me last time, actually, you kind of grade them. And that's actually quite good, because when I was looking actively to grow mine, I used to get emails coming left, right, and center, which was great. But then you spend a lot of time just looking at deals, and usually they're overpriced or their expectations are too high. But if you've got a way of filtering, so you know which ones you can prioritize your time on, that are most likely to get accepted at a reasonable price, that is quite effective, I imagine.
People always say to me, because in our business, the two most important things tend to be find a deal and the money. And for the deal phase, I always say the most important thing that you need to think about is your own time, because that's the thing that will be running out. There's deals everywhere. And to not lose focus on that, and to always improve your process and systems. That's one reason why I think it helps. I also have a bit of a, psychometrics testing and all of that. I've got a trader personality profile.
Trader.
I've had a very active eBay account since the age of 14. I lied about my age to get it set up, and I've traded a lot of stuff on there. Literally anything and everything. To give you a flavour of what that was, during COVID, I acknowledged that all these pubs and restaurants were putting in the eco domes where you could sit 10 people outside. I knew that it was growing, and I knew that this stock had been around for a while, and I knew it was a high ticket. So my view on trading is it's got to be a fairly high ticket item, because it costs the same amount of time to trade something that's worth £1,000 to £100. So anyway, I essentially found a provider for these eco-geodesic domes on page 7 of Google. I knew that that provider wouldn't be on first page of Google. I then used my eBay account, which their marketing spend is high enough to be in the actual shopping section on page 1 of Google, so before any paid listing, PPC listing. I used their stock photos. I advertised it for, I think, £1,500 per dome, and I agreed that we'd buy them direct for about £700 per dome. So a buyer would come onto Google, buy a dome or 5 through me. I would then use their money they've paid me to buy the same stock order on page 7, and then do the delivery receipt to the supplier that I had sourced. And that is pretty much how my mind works. Translating that into property, I'll give some tips on, when it comes to houses. For an example, I started viewing houses to convert into co-living projects in the town that we wanted to target. And I quickly learned, I spent too long analysing the numbers. If I could view 10 properties on a Saturday, I wanted to get an offer out on all 10 that day. And the way I had to do that is I looked at everything that I'd reviewed before, work an average cost per bed that I could pay for a house, because the rent roll's the same at the end. So it's how many beds, what can I pay per bed? And as soon as I got that into my head, I knew how quickly I could offer on properties and prioritise the offers, because I knew that in that area we can pay 70k per bed. And if you're viewing 10 properties and you know that metric, I know what I can get in at. I know what my build per bed is. And yeah, it's a slightly portfolio view, because every house has its nuance.
Sure.
And then you put in the abnormals that might go into that, whether you're doing new build or converting the loft. But you can quite quickly then get to the numbers and just see quite clearly whether it's overpriced or not. And that speeds up the process hugely.
And the tenant profile of these sorts of kind of, I call it the new buy-to-let, because I think buy-to-let, the margin is so low. I mean, if you are doing it, you're going to be at 50, 60% LTV. And there's a different type of like high net worth that are just looking for low risk, lower stuff, just to park cash, maybe foreign nationals. But for your average kind of UK investor that owns a group of businesses and they want a property portfolio as an asset class, the HMO, it's high yielding enough that makes it kind of profitable and worthwhile. What sort of tenants are you using? Are you doing in those ones for central suites? Is it social housing? Is it professionals? Is it students? Or is it anything that comes?
So pretty much all of our tenants are young professionals. We didn't want to deal. I know that I said that the theory or idea came from student housing. We actually managed a project for a student housing landlord in Reading, believe it or not. They love what we do. They said, look, can you take our asset from ours to yours, but we still won't retain the asset, almost like a PME type consultant model. And transitioning the new tenants moving in, it was very clear that they couldn't afford, they just didn't have any power behind, paying rents, paying the deposit. It was all too tight and squeaky, and damages came about, and then you try and charge them for their deposit, and it's a shared deposit. Too messy for us. So we focus on locations that don't actually have universities. We focus on places that have good employment. And pretty much all of our tenants, I would have said, 95% of our tenants are young professionals. You might get the odd person moving for studying and they want to move out into a slightly countryside location. Believe it or not, in one of the locations we operate in, 70% of that 95% are scientists, because there's a huge science park in this town in Oxfordshire. And they're getting paid 50 to 70 grand. They're renting our room for 850, and it's not touching the sides on their net take home. They pay a good deposit, and in Central Suites, we've never had a rent arrear. And we've got quite a few beds now, so that's quite a feat. I think we've had something like 1,000 tenants in and out of our properties. And I think that if we were in the student space, we would be spending a lot more time, you can see a recurring theme here, on managing that. And we do have a social portfolio outside of Central Suites, but the social portfolio is a completely different beast. Central Suites is bricks and mortar, a logical product that works well in those assets. It's cheaper for the tenant than renting a one-bed flat, so it works on all accounts. And that's almost building like a legacy portfolio. Our social portfolio is directly linked and correlated to local housing allowance, which is not as high as we achieve in Central Suites, but we have to pay the council tax and bills. But the lease in our social business might be 25 years full repairing, therefore we can look at a yield compression valuation. So it's taking an asset from a house to a completely different asset class. You're basically taking a house with a commercial lease, but residential use, which is kind of like the dream, because everyone wants commercial leases because it's full repairing, let and forget, come back in 25 years. It's increased every year. But residential use is the non-cyclical. Everyone has to have a place to live.
So with that, we'll come on to, I want to go into more detail about the social housing stuff as well.
Cool.
And just whilst we're on talking about that though, because you mentioned about the difference between the bricks and mortar valuation and the commercial valuation, and for Central Suites, you really focus on the bricks and mortar valuation. Why is it not as attractive to go for the commercial valuation for those particular assets?
SME Property is doing quite exciting projects, and the way that I envisaged Central Suites is to be building that portfolio almost like one house at a time, growing and growing and growing, building a very scalable model that could be, something huge one day, but is one step at a time. Looking at comparison, SME Property is up to about 38 million in delivery in 7 years. We're still in Central Suites delivering a few, maybe 8 houses a year, which is still a good achievement, but it's a very different model. And that, for me, is like a legacy portfolio. We're building our rent roll, we're building our assets, we're reinvesting capital, we're obviously growing the team. And the reason that I am not a massive fan of yield-based valuations or rental-based valuations, whatever you want to call it, is the locations that we operate in are suburb towns. So we're operating in locations that are between 20 and 60,000 people. So not major cities. And we love that because we're the first there. We're kind of the monopoly when we're there. And what we don't want to happen is we go to a location, we start charging high room rents. People come off, I won't mention any names, but a HMO course and think that they, want to do it in their location that they live in. They see what we're charging on spare room, which for some of our rooms can almost be £1,000 per room. And they're looking at a 3-bed house that we bought for maybe even 270 in some occasions. So they flood to the market. So we've now got 80 beds of our own in this location. We've now competing with another 50 that are shared across 3 other landlords that are trying to make it go, like we did it from the outset. And what happens is the first 80 beds that you've bought, refurbished and refinanced on rent-based valuations, the room rates start compressing because the supply and demand is going down in that area. So you're now in negative equity in your portfolio. So it's completely counterintuitive, in my opinion, to aggressively grow that type of business. Yeah. When it's for me, it's much more like a family, lifestyle-y business. We've got a great relationship with our builder, we've got a great relationship with our plumber and electrician and our handyman, and we've got a really nice, close-knit team. And then we'll just go to a new location. Once we know that we're reaching that supply and demand ourselves, it's going to make it difficult for anyone else because we've already made our stamp, and we'll just go to another location, which we've done now 3 times. So we like the cute, almost like marketplace villages. We love those, like 10 minutes from Oxford or 10 minutes from Reading, and people do live there because people work there, and we like that locality, and that's what our niche, I suppose.
Yeah, because a lot of people talk about, and it's been my mindset, I think, as well, to a certain extent, is that I want as much demand as possible, and I want to have students there, but I also want to have jobs there, and I also want to have leisure there as well. So, there might be festivals or something, and I'm going to rent it to anybody and everybody for whatever reason. But you find that actually, no, you just need one really good, strong marketplace, and the most people that have the most money are people that are earning money every single month. This episode is brought to you by our sponsors, XP Surveys. XP Surveys are the brainchild of Jack Jiggens and Ben Richards of XP Property, and they've been on Property People, so go check out their episode. Architects and property developers start their client journeys on the foundation of having the right data to make decisions. Understanding the building or the land you're working with, it is paramount to get started. So, XP Surveys offers fully referenced, accurate and timely surveys which enables enhanced and faster decision making, improving your productivity when looking at buildings. XP Surveys not only knows how to conduct the right measured building and or topographical surveys to meet your technical requirements, they know how to deliver them the best to support your wider relationships. So go check them out, links in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
Yeah. So a way to look at it, which may change your mindset, is we have a HMO in a location which people would argue is too small for HMOs, which is where I live, Henley-on-Thames. The population is, say, let's round it up to make it easier and sort of make it easier for my next point, is about 20,000 in Henley-on-Thames. I think that's a really small town. You know, we've got one supermarket in the town centre, that's it. It's a super small town. But out of that 20,000 people, our target audience is 20-year-olds to 40-year-olds. The average first-time buyer in the UK is 37 years old. So that's moving out from mum and dad or renting to buying their own home. Our product is cheaper than renting a one-bed flat, and you get more asset for that rent. So we're helping that first-time buyer reduce that time. But let's leave it at that, 20 to 40 years old for now. So that tends to make up for about 25 to 35% of the population. So let's take the smaller amount for that. So there's 5,000 people in Henley-on-Thames that are living in Henley between 20 and 40, and we want to grow a 150-bed portfolio there. Right. Is there enough demand?
Absolutely, on those numbers.
And that's a tiny little town.
Yeah, no. And when you break it down like that, it does make sense as well. I think it's just the easy way of thinking about it is just like, you know, if I've got £1 million in a million people in a city or a town, then there's just going to be more chance. But actually, if you boil it down, break it down, you can see the logic behind it. And you've got pretty good occupancy rates.
Oh, I think our occupancy rate's 0.5% void per year,
which is incredible.
Yeah.
My biggest fear being a landlord is voids. You know, everything else I can deal with. I can deal with rising costs and this, that, and the other. I just can't deal with there's no money coming in to cover any of the costs, because then the gaping hole will
Asset becomes a liability.
Yeah, massively. Even if I have to top it up a little bit, at least there's income coming in. If it's void, I'll drop the rent a little bit just to get some income in. I just don't like voids under any circumstances. That's my biggest fear. And I think that as a landlord, especially become a portfolio landlord, the more voids you've got, the more chance you've got of going under.
I think an interesting process to do for that, for anyone that is concerned about voids, for HMOs and co-living, it's great because you never have 6 voids all at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
You sort of balance that void. Great, we're not making high margin this month, but once we fill it, we're back up to it. It's just work out your break-even point. So I mentioned our cost: 2 bedrooms pay the mortgage, 1 pays the bills, roughly. Across the portfolio, and then we've got 2 bedrooms that could be completely vacant for a year, and we haven't lost a penny.
Exactly.
That's the benefit of co-living and HMOs.
And do you typically go above 6, because 6 is the kind of the magic number for PD? Do you ever go kind of like 7, 8, 10, 15, 16 beds we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, So one of the visions that I always had for Central Suites is, you know, my brother's 5 years younger than me. I'm 32. I want to scale it to quite a significant portfolio, you know, maybe 1,000 properties. And then with the goal, the reason why I said maybe is because that's my goal, and my brother's, he hasn't confirmed yet.
He hasn't caught up yet.
But the reason that I like bricks and mortar valuations and predominantly doing buildings under 6 beds, so 6 beds and below, it's actually getting really difficult to do. We did a load of 4 beds when we started out. That's getting really difficult now with interest rates and rising costs.
Yeah.
5 beds still work, 6 beds still work, subject to running the numbers on a 5 bed. But the reason we like those is they could quite easily be converted back into a family home, which could be sold or rented.
Yeah.
The main reason I like that is because one day, I don't want to keep growing like we do. The reason why we're doing HMO and co-living projects is because the return on cash is so high that you can keep growing. That's not going to really excite, you know, it might excite us forever, but I would always want the option to convert half back to single lets, which basically reduces the management by 80%, or reduce all of them unless they're really strong, evidently HMOs, which might be above 6 beds. I think you start to lose the character of a house when you take it above that. But we will look at 7 beds. For an example, we bought a mixed-use building in January. It's a grade 2 listed, so we had to go to full planning, and it was big enough, so we went for 7, and we got 7. So that's an example of, it doesn't have to be below 6 or below beds, but we would rather that. And the reason being is because it's so much more scalable. The amount of stock we can buy compared to someone that wants to do sui generis planning, they're wasting, by the time they've got that deal through legals, planning, HMO licensing, I could do 2 deals at a 6 bed, so I've already got 12 beds. Why am I that bothered about that? It's just so much quicker.
And when you're doing the construction as well, do you have local builders? Do you have your own team? Or is it kind of the tried and tested people that you've been doing on all the other projects? You kind of got a good relationship with them?
Yeah, so when we went to Abingdon, we just took on a new builder. So they get fixed price JCT contract. If it is a big build, if it's a little one, I'm not too bothered. But it's the same builder. They know our products. They know what we do. We actually do JV flips with the same builder on the side. So we do a few projects with him a year where we both put money in, he builds it out, makes a profit on the build, and then we trade it out and split the profit. So we got a really strong relationship with that builder. And with the other locations we're operating, we're trialing new builders to build that exact relationship with. So I think our builder in this location, I think he's done something like 30 projects with us now.
Wow, amazing. That's good going. Over how many years?
6.
Bloody good going, that is. I'm all about good relationships and building them and, doing repeat business. It just makes everything easier. Like I said, you get efficiencies and the trust building is second to none to help you grow and keep going. But I want to talk now as well about XP Property.
Cool.
Because the numbers that you're doing in that business now are phenomenal. And you kind of mentioned it a little bit. If you don't mind running us through those numbers again. So where are you at now in terms of number of units, total GDV, over what time horizon to get these kind of projects completed?
Yeah, so at this moment in time, we're on site with £38 million worth of delivery, and that's across 70 units, flats and houses, predominantly conversions, a few new builds in there, but we find that our competitive advantage isn't new build ground up unless we've taken it through planning and added value there, because fundamentally we don't have construction in-house, so we're mostly competitive on how we find it and secure it, and then how Ben redesigns it or gets PD on it, essentially, which is obviously a lot quicker than land. And we predominantly operate in West, North London, and then Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire.
It's interesting that you're quite in tune with what your kind of where your edge is and where you can't compete. I found that same thing as well. If I didn't have construction in-house, I just found that any development deals that I was looking at, I'd always get outbid by somebody else that can effectively do the construction a lot cheaper than I could. And it kind of cut that whole pipe dream for me, being a big developer, short, because I just wasn't really good enough at the construction. You've got Ben on board who helps you with the design of the layout and takes things through planning. And he was telling us last time that he was with us about how much he wrestles with the planning system. I guess you don't miss any of that. You don't get involved in any of that.
Yeah, try and mix a salesperson with a planning officer. It just doesn't work. Ben's a lot more patient with it. That's one thing we did set up really clearly in our business when we set up the business. Together, we had clearly defined roles, and obviously the business started with just me and him, and we were actually talking to someone earlier about sending out marketing emails to investors, and I sort of remembered the other day that Ben and I used to pull that together every month. Obviously now we've got a team that does that, but it just sort of reminisced where we started out. But my section of the business is acquisitions, funding and structure, and then Ben does design, delivery and sales. And when we say it's not necessarily just us in the business. We've got a business around us of a team of skilled people that help us in those areas. So I've got someone that helps me in acquisitions. Ben's got a technical project manager and a project manager that helps him in delivery. And then we've got 3 admin people that sit sort of over the group in different areas.
That's quite a powerful message as well, I think, is that some people, this whole overnight success thing is like they think, oh my God, it's so easy for you because you've got somebody that helps you to do this. But at some point, not too long ago, you were doing literally all of this yourself, right?
Our first hire was in 2020, yeah.
And then you've been building the team ever since. What has been since the last time we spoke, and what you're finding today. What are the biggest challenges within XP Property specifically at the moment for you?
Cool. Huge question. So I suppose our biggest challenge has actually just been learnings. It's not been the most straightforward market, but I feel that bad deals are bad in good markets, or bad markets, and good deals are good in good markets, or not so good in bad markets.
I might have to rewind that. Can you say that again?
Bad deals are bad in good markets or bad markets, and good deals are good in good markets, but not so good in bad markets.
Well done. That was quite impressive. Okay, so your
Challenges.
Yeah, challenges,
Yeah.
basically. So these deals, right now we're in a bad market.
Yes.
But you can find good
difficult
deals.
market, yeah.
But delivering them maybe is a little bit more challenging. And exiting them, rather.
Yeah, so I think the biggest risk in a bad market is exit, in my opinion, especially for sales. Exit for rents are fine. We've had some changes for stress testing on finance, and we've got a scheme in North London that you're never going to rent that back out and refinance it and make a margin off that. It's just not going to work. The yield's not there. A lot of the stuff we do in Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire will yield up, and we can hold that stock. I think the biggest learnings in the last sort of 2 years has been really implementing what I call critical mass for our new business. And what I mean by that is, I think when I came on your podcast, we were probably a small and growing team. At that time, we were doing lots of little deals. In 2019, 2020, 2021, we did about 12 deals each year, small deals. I'm talking 1 to 6 units, maximum, 400 to 1.8 million GDV. And what we learned is we weren't focusing the business as much as a business. We were just getting really excited about profitable deals.
Deals, yeah.
Exactly. And what happens is you end up running around a lot to do a lot of multiple deals of individual units. And there was a real turning point, which is kind of around the time that I believe the podcast was, is we bought a block of 14 flats that we did some asset management, refurbished every flat, did a huge loft conversion, created a 4-bedroom co-living property in the top. It won 2 awards. We bought for 1.5. We spent 400K on it and revalued at 3.5 million quid.
Unbelievable.
And that took the same amount of time, energy, stress, and resource out of the team. So our project manager, me, Ben, Aaron, who works alongside me, and our admin team, as an end of terrace new build that we did, one house that we made probably 50K. And that was a point where we said, we know how to do bigger deals. We're comfortable doing bigger deals. We could even go much bigger than we are now, but we're kind of comfortable where we are. But the value return on time is actually becoming a lot more prevalent. So we're not running around so much. And, getting 12 things bought just from a legal perspective is painful. So we just decided to go bigger, and we're now at critical mass, I would say, for the size of our business. I think we could go up to about 50 to 60 million in delivery without hiring any more team. That team is the same team that would have made us 50K per 12 deals that we would have done. Let's say 2 weren't that great and 2 were a bit better. It is kind of not really moving the needle. So we understood the business burn rate, we understood critical mass, and we understood that bigger deals, I'm not saying national home builder size, I'm not saying strategic land, I'm saying 2 to 15 million GDV, below those big guys, but above what I call the accidental developers. And we're loving that sweet spot. It's a lot easier, less competitive. You do have to scale up. Before we did some bigger deals before we bought some big deals last year. And when I say big deals, we bought our first over 10 mil GDV scheme. Our average investment across the board was 400K. And then our average investment was about £1 million. So to learn and train and redo to build that, so we could have had 15 investors do one deal at 400 grand, but we've grown, and we have to facilitate that growth. So the challenges haven't been deals. We've always been good at finding deals, if I may say so myself. The challenge has been planning, but not from Ben's doing or a planning consultant's doing. It's just a painful process. And, we could go on for hours about the infrastructure, what needs to change and what you think needs to change, what I think needs to change. But at the end of the day, it's slow, it's shit, it's not pragmatic. And that's been quite painful, which is why we're focusing more on conversions. So if it needs full planning, we're only agreeing it's subject to. If it doesn't need planning, we're getting PD and then we're buying it once it's got consent. So we've learnt that. But that enables us to get to the size of critical mass where our team are paid, there's big profits, and we've grown. So it feels like we could decide to stay here or go again. But I feel that if you're running a two-man band with support, you need to analyse what deals you need to be doing at that level and not go above your pay grade, because otherwise then you need resource, and then you haven't built the revenue for the resource and the infrastructure. So I suppose I think we decided on our business size over 2 years ago, but it's been taking action to implement that scaling up, which has been a lot of reinvestment from our own cash pot, been a lot carrying, the overheads of our business to get to the bigger deals. It's been changing a lot of processes. It's been bringing in better team. Our team are really good now. So I suppose growing, and that comes at an interesting time because a lot of people have been struggling to grow or not choosing to grow at this moment in time. But we have our own risk metrics internally that we, review. Like I said, exiting on a refinance, there's only one scheme out of the 6 that we're delivering that is possibly not refinanceable. So we knew with growth comes risk, and then we've had to readapt that risk into how we analyse pre-purchase. So we've got a criteria of what we're looking for, and been delivering that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely, and some. There's a whole bunch of challenges, and that's the bottom line. And it just depends on which angle you're looking at it, or what we're talking about here specifically. But from planning to just growing a business, hiring team members, using your own funds, cash flowing it. That sounds like pretty much everything that any business owner is going through a growth phase. But it's good that you identify all those things, and I think that's partly the reason why you're having the success that we can see, that you're going in the right direction at the very least, never without any challenges, of course. One of the couple of things actually that you mentioned, though, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper, is first we'll start with the team members actually. Mm-hmm. So you said you were just starting to hire then, and now you've got a really good team. In team members that you're hiring, whatever position it is, what are the most important traits that you're looking for in those sorts of people? Is it their CV and their history and their experience, or is it attitude? Because I always see this kind of like, what's more important? Show me somebody that's got a great attitude, I can train them up, or you know what, actually, I just need somebody that knows how to do this thing because I haven't got the time to train them up. So I need them to have kind of both almost. What have you found over the last couple of years been hiring and firing?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And recruitment is so important in your business. You're obviously trying to get 10x from each employee to really pick up the bandwidth of how fast Ben and I move and think and do. And our expectations are high. We can't compare if I was doing that. But, if you think about the exact role that's required, you sometimes do. You think if I was doing this, that, and the other. But I suppose first and foremost for a business owner is you've got to be able to let someone create their own role within that position. As far as hiring and personality, we've always had a rule. We do want someone super sharp, and just for everyone's benefit, that's thinking about that is I'm not academically very smart. But when I'm passionate about something and it's in something that I know what I'm doing, I absorb information, I learn really quickly, and I think creatively. So I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be book smart, and it doesn't have to be life smart. We're kind of looking for a general combination of all. We're quite a small team, so we say to anyone that joins our team, you're going to be 1/7 of this business. Yeah. Can you handle it, sort of thing. And the smart cookies do you can sort of get a taste of their ideas, the questions they ask, what interests them, and how they're, we've had people in our interviews that have challenged what we're doing. Why haven't you thought of this, or why haven't you done this? Wow. And I love that. But across the board, we've got, it somewhat depends on each role. So our technical project manager is an ex-building surveyor that also studied project management at a university.
Right.
So he's got great experience with projects. He's also smart, so he gels within the team, and also the cultural fit, it was perfect. I think one of the reasons that it was such a good fit is because he reached out to us. So did our QS that supports me. And then the other roles, which are more administration roles. We've got 3 ladies that work in our business. One does office management and marketing. She was actually an Oxford grad, has a passion for design, creation, marketing, very good at writing, wordage on paper and pulling stuff together, and super, super bright. And then we've got our business manager, who's got actually a legals and finance background in real estate and in bigger companies as well. And she just basically deals with all our conveyancing, all our legal work, and massively takes that off our way. And then Ben and I have a PA that works sort of mostly alongside me, but also Ben at times where he's on holiday or traveling a lot. But across the board, the cultural fit is there. The speed in how we move is there, and some prehistoric experience is relative, but I'd much rather hire someone that's a quick learner than someone that's already learned. That's my view. So I don't tend to focus too much on what they've learned, because that could have taken them 10 times the amount of time as someone that's got less experience but is a quick learner.
Yeah, exactly. So you're looking for just smart people, basically.
Yeah.
And they've got a similar kind of approach to the culture that you've set out. Mm-hmm. And then these people are finding you as well because you've now got a public profile from winning awards, etc., which makes sense. And then the other point that I wanted to dive into a little bit more, because you mentioned it a couple of times, and specifically that a lot of what you do is finding deals and raising finance. So how have you found raising finance, going for those bigger tickets? I know you've done some crowdfunding in the past. I know you work with private investors. As the tractions got better, the track records got better, you'd think that it would be easier to find funding, but now you're looking for more money and bigger tickets. So kind of how have you found that progression? Are you enjoying it more? Is it easier, or is it the same thing, just different numbers?
Yeah, really, really good question. And it's funny how when you elevate to a slightly different size, you're challenged with the same problem at a different level. But it has been very different. So a lot of our investments get to, let's say, 5 to 10 mil GDV delivery per annum. Has been, people with SaaS pensions, or people that have done well in business, a little bit of, to some degree, people's pension pots that they've got aside, or even spare money that they've got aside and are interested in doing what we're doing. And we've actually got 150, I think, investors, 75% of that we've actually done deals with. And we've built that up and built great relationships. I call that sort of more retail-y money, and that comes with different motives, a different level of risk, different way of dealing, and definitely they require a lot more management. So you do need to be, because it might be their retirement pot. So you do need to feed into them and be a lot softer around the details of the project. It's not black and white. Whereas I feel we've now moved, in my opinion, more to slightly more corporate structure, where our investors are very commercially minded. They look at it as a deal. They want to know the black and white details of the deal. They don't necessarily believe that if this project fails, it's the end of them, it's the end of us, it's the end of the relationship.
Just another investment for them.
Exactly. Obviously, we that's no one's intention for that to happen, but it's a different mindset. They need less management. They need more detailed management. So we send out an investor report to every single one of our investors that invested in that. So we do one project for one investor. They get a monthly, quite an analytical report. And then I do the softer stuff, just check in with them, go to lunch with them, and sort of sound them out and see if they got any more money. But elevating to that next level has been a similar process, but learning new things. Weirdly, I kind of feel like we're reaching a new size where we could go a bit to bigger funds, so family offices with a pre-arranged agreement, or even to smaller funds. And that is a completely different kettle of fish. I feel like we're a big fish in a small pond looking at the sea, and we're actually in judgment at the moment whether that is worthwhile the jump, because they're definitely more greedy, and they give less value for the developer, whereas we're still dealing on a personal level. In a fund you will have a point of contact, but I'm talking about an individual, a super high net worth or an ultra high net worth that is interested in us, that sees maybe a lot of them in us, because they're on maybe more senior years. And I really enjoy that relationship, because it's commercial. We know what we're doing. The issue is when we do a deal or two with them, they might not have more to do more. So that's where that itch comes from. So do we just bag all this together and go, right, we're going out for 15 million, which is what I've probably done 50 meetings to discuss about sort of bunching it all together, because I'm really trying to understand who and what that looks like. I'm still undecided, if I'm honest. Maybe when I record one in 2 years, you'll know.
There you go. Well, we're with the trilogy. We'll be back with a third one. The third business that I wanted to talk about as well is XP Surveys. So this is new since the last time we spoke.
Yeah.
And we have had Ben on, and he's talked a little bit about it, but I also want to find out from your perspective, how, the motivation to, you've already got enough on your plate, it sounds like. You're trying to raise 10 million here, 5 million there. You've got 30 plus million of pipeline to deliver. Why do XP Surveys from your point of view?
Good question. So I'll talk about Ben's point of view first, and then mine. So Ben thought that there was a good business opportunity, because before any architect does any work, they need a full measured survey to draw on. That's as whatever it is, full accurate measured survey. There's no speculation. It's just an accurate survey. So floor plans, topographical, roof plans, elevations. Once that's done, the architect can then design something and submit both to planning. So Ben knew that running the architectural practice, which is a very similar business in a lot of ways, it's obviously to do with sites, it's obviously to do with measuring/design, but he has to get that measured survey, and he was paying a measured surveyor a lot to do that. So from his perspective, he was looking at a business that could fold into his existing business, so he's sort of running down the supply chain to a revenue that he wasn't targeting pre-architectural work. Then you move, we've got a development company and a management and lettings business. So we've basically got design, delivery, and management. The bit that is missing is the surveying part at the front end. I believe Ben wanted to do XP Surveys, and that was his sort of, his brainstorm and his idea. And then XP Property started to flourish, and he realized that we did have different skills, and we looked at things in different ways. And he realized that, and I knew this, that our partnership is 1 + 1 = 3. Like, we do get more value out of our partnership than if we were alone. To put that in perspective, we wouldn't have grown at half the speed if we were apart. I feel that there's some fusion
parts
there.
The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Yeah.
Exactly. So Ben sort of proposed it to me and said, "What are your thoughts?" And me being me, I thought, let's do it. Let's build a business plan out. I'm very much front end. He's like then delivery and management. But what was attractive for me is Ben's learned a lot of skills to get Aura Architecture to where it is, which is, no mean feat. He's not in the business anymore. He's probably spending an hour a week in that business. It's turning over about £1 million a year. He's got 14 in the team, and it's a profitable enterprise. We want to scale XP Surveys to a national business, because whether you do a survey in Plymouth or Edinburgh, it's the same output. So it's a very scalable business. We had great ideas on what would make the industry better. So a classic entrepreneur, find a problem, make a solution, put it together. We had like 6 ideas of things that we could do during the process of a surveying life cycle, from winning the business to pre-quote, to going on site, to outputting the output, and then producing the drawings. So combined with all that info, ideas, we built a business plan out. And then life got busy. I'll tell you the original story because it's actually quite fun. And then life got busy, and it just sort of sat there for a few months, and we weren't really doing anything on it. And I think it was because we were faced with challenges in other businesses and blah, blah, blah. And then I moved a tenant in. It was a weekend. I moved one of our tenants into Central Suites, his property, which isn't that frequent because Rob normally deals with all the lettings management or some of our team. And a guy was moving in. He was relocating to play for part of the local rugby club, and he'd just been made redundant from his job, so he relocated to play for a new club. I said, so what do you do? And he said, well, I've actually just been made redundant. I said, well, what did you do? And he said, I've 10 years in measured building and topographical surveying. And I was like, do you want a job? So that was Saturday, and Monday, XP Surveys was born.
Wow.
And the reason, from my perspective, why it was such a no-brainer is because I believe we have the contacts and the capabilities to take it to a national business. That individual that joined was on a salary which was probably half of the cost all of our cell phone businesses were paying in measured surveying costs per year. So already, if he just sat in the businesses, just surveying our own stuff, we've made a profit. And it's weird that that didn't come into thought before that moment in time. So it was a no-brainer to take on staff member number one. And then actually we went through a similar critical mass dilemma as XP Property. We're like, this business either runs really well as a one-man band, where you don't have overheads of staff, payroll, bookkeeping, all of the office admin, or it runs really well if you start to hit like 3 mil turnover. And then once you get to 3, you might as well go to 20. So that's where we're at. We're currently scaling it up to get to where we need to be.
Interesting. I'm very, very keen to see how that one grows as well. And it does sound like it's very complementary, not only to your, to the stuff that Ben does on his or architecture, but certainly on your development stuff as well. And then you've got an expensive bit of kit to go with it. Yeah,
so our 3D laser scanning kit is worth about 50k. It's actually an insane amount. It takes million points of data per second. It essentially sits on a tripod. You press go, and it spins around and basically refracts lasers to depict the distances of things. It can pick up like 2 millimeter of accuracy over like 100 meters. So you create basically a 3D model in tech. And then that's the kit that reads the data on site, and you've obviously got to place it in loads of different locations so that it builds the full picture. Yeah. And then we output that back to site and work on predominantly AutoCAD, or if it's in 3D and Revit, to draw up whether the client wants 3D drawings or whether the client wants 2D drawings, and then essentially sell that to them.
No wonder it's that expensive. You could do a million points of data in a second.
Yeah, it's an incredible bit of kit. There is less accurate bits of kit which you can literally walk around with. So there's
the old-fashioned way was just a laser measure or a tape, right? Now.
Yeah. Well, the old bit of kit which we do have, which is called a total station, which is where you shoot loads of points. So you measure where you are. It shoots one laser measure, and then that point forms almost like a join the dots on AutoCAD, and then you join it up, and you've got the measurements of the building. We still use that because that's good for topographical surveys where you can't actually see the topography of the land. You can't shoot a dim, but you walk around with a pole and it tracks where you are and what heights you're at.
Technical stuff that goes a little bit over my head, I must admit.
I'm the least technical in that business, so I've done well to do that.
Aparo Social, I believe
Yes.
it's called, is the social housing which we touched on earlier as well. And that side, again, discussed it in brief, but that's done some big numbers as well already. And you've just had a rental increase in
April.
LHA rates. So how's all that kind of going for you at the moment? Have you seen a little bit of an uptick in kind of monthly revenue and profits, and then on what it looks like on the balance sheet?
Yeah, so Aparo has been an interesting venture. It's come with its trials and tribulations and huge amounts of learning. One thing I always forget when we're in because it's a super difficult business model to run, because you're essentially buying residential assets, you're converting them into social housing, HMOs, I'll call them, but they're actually, ours are basically studio apartments, and you're leasing it to a registered housing association. In the period since we started that business, so 3.5 years ago, the first housing association we signed the leases with ended up, I don't know whether they are, but they've gone through hardship financially, and it was a bit of a shock for us because we've got 140 beds. I'm talking over 100 grand a month in revenue that was potentially jeopardized. We managed to agree, amicably to shift to a new housing association. So that period was also quite painful because we had to first off negotiate it, get off the leases, get into new ones. Granted, we've had an 8.5% average, I think, across our portfolio of LHA increase across the portfolio, which came into effect this month. But that isn't actually that good because for the last 3 years, the government froze LHA rates, but private rents kept going up. So it's something, but we were hoping for something a little bit more drastic than that. The way that they grade the local housing allowances, it should be within the 30th percentile of market rents. We know that market rents since 3 years ago have gone up more than 8.5%.
Yeah.
So it's not reflective of where the market should be, but we'll take it. It's better than nothing. But where we are with the portfolio, just to put it into context, so we're 14 assets, 140 beds, 10 average across each asset. We've bought care homes, we've bought disused HMOs, we've bought operating HMOs, we've bought houses, and we fundamentally go in, refurbish them to a very similar standard to we do in Central Suites, just slightly different product. And that's our sort of guide on that is actually the Registered Housing Association. Our tenants need care, so there's a few elements that we have to factor into the properties and certain nuances. So for an example, in that portfolio, we actually break down the council tax per room, whereas in Central Suites it's per property. Right. So a few nuances to iron that out, and then we actually sign a 25 or 10-year lease, depending on the size of the building, before we've even bought the asset with the RP. And then we hand over, they take it over, and we know that we've got that rent roll. The beauty of this portfolio is you have residential asset with a commercial lease with a residential end client. You can have a 25 or 10-year lease. It's to some degree linked to local housing allowance, which very badly is linked to inflationary matters, such as they go into consideration of market rent and other factors. But the benefit is, pension funds and institutional funding and aggregators and other people are interested in that income for that long. So they're interested in buying that income, which means that it's not a HMO portfolio anymore. Someone's buying an income ticket.
Do you have a horizon for when you might want to exit that one? Because that's kind of like at the end of the 25-year term, then who knows where we'll be by that time. The property hopefully will have doubled in value anyway. That's what they say every 10 years, but certainly in 20, 25 years. But is there a shorter time horizon where you think, this would be quite a nice time to get out? We've got like a 5-10 year agreement with our investors, that sort of thing. Yeah,
so we had actually agreed a sale in 2020, which was on a really strong compressed value of 5.5%. This was during the Home REIT scandal. For those that aren't aware, Home REIT is a real estate investment trust, I think the biggest in the UK. And they essentially, a lot of their strategy, due diligence and activity came under huge scrutiny because it wasn't what they would say they were doing. And it put a lot of pressure on the social market. Buyers started moving away from it for the short period of time. Time will heal all, but our buyer pulled away, which put us then in a much more difficult market to sell. So we're currently playing the long game, taking the rent rolls, stabilising, refinancing the last ones we finished, and essentially either just holding very long term and growing on that, because what you get with aggregation and yield purchases is the higher the value of the portfolio, the lesser yield you can actually charge, i.e. So for an example, our portfolio is worth 20 million. If we delivered another 30 million, we're really starting to then excite some bigger players.
Right.
And that original £20 million portfolio would actually be worth more as part of the £50 million portfolio.
Yeah, it'd be more compression there because
Correct.
You're going with bigger swathes of capital, and they're just happy to keep their head above inflation.
Yeah. So at the minute we're counting our chickens. We're making. It's been a stressful period because we've had to deliver 140 beds in under 2 years in construction. We've had difficulties with tenants. We've had difficulties with our actual tenant, so the RP, and been spending a lot of time on dealing with that. So for now, we're just sort of taking a breather and just sort of like re-gearing up to whether we want to, cookie cutter, grow this again, whether we can get the right funding in place to actually do that that's more attractive. But it's been a huge learning curve, and there is a great space for it. It's a little bit tarnished at the moment because of the market, and also it's not just the home REIT scandal. There's also, as soon as Liz Truss, kick-started the interest rate change. I don't think she was the reason for it, but she kick-started it. The space in the market, no one's going to buy a 5.5% net yield portfolio if they're raising debt against it, because the debt is higher than that income. So what happens is all of those buyers leave the market, and then all of the buyers that don't need debt can up what they're paying because there's less people in that space. So we're just letting the market come back to where it needs to be. It's not going to be back where it was. Who knows where it will be? That's one of the variable things, and also why Central Suites isn't a yield-based valuation, because we're kind of now taking a very low cash flowing income. When I say low percentage, I mean it's a lot of income because it's a big portfolio. But that's
I mean, I think it's very exciting that you're on both sides, because like there's a lot of people that are just doing one or the other. I'm doing the kind of more Central Suite stuff. Certainly haven't ventured into the bigger play stuff. But then it's a good example of all the things that can go right or wrong, and why actually a little bit of a hedge on both has actually been quite good for you. But also for me, what it tells me is that I always say this: property is a marathon, not a sprint. I probably say that on every single show that we do, and if you can just ride it out, generally the market will pick back up, and you can always have a successful exit. It's always just keeping your head above water, basically, is the biggest challenge. And I think with the social stuff, I'm very, very confident that that will come good for you.
Yeah, so I've got an interesting metric that you sort of like marathon or not risk, but anyway, I look at 3 metrics with every project. So in Aparo, Central Suites, XP Property, and that is risk, profit, and cash flow. Businesses can be the most profitable business but not have the cash flow. Businesses could be not very profitable but super low risk. So it's all about taking those metrics in, and all of our businesses offer different levels of metrics into those businesses. Obviously, we're there to manage them, and that's our job. And when we get into deals, we're thinking about those 3 metrics. But exactly like you said, when you said keeping your head above water, you could have the most profitable deal in the world, but if you can't cash flow getting to the end line,
you're screwed, isn't it? I mean, you can have a loss-making businesses, but they're cash flow positive, and they're actually still alive. Whereas you're absolutely right. You can have a very profitable business, but if you just run out of cash to keep up with your overheads one month to the next, you could become insolvent. So, and it's good the way that you've managed all these things. Now, I'm going to ask this question because I asked Bennett, and I think it's only fair that you get asked it as well. Is that babies, or I know that you love dogs, you've got dogs. If you had all of these babies that you've got, all of these businesses, do you have a favorite?
Oh. So I'm going to come back with the most cop-out answer in the world. So across XP, I'll do it linear as a project goes through. XP Surveys, Aura Architecture, XP Property, and Central Suites. We have 30 staff, and every time we interview someone, they kind of are trying to get their head around how it all works. And what I always say is, every business is its own, and it's got its own bank account, its own branding, and its own products, and what it does. It has, as we're an ecosystem, they work with each other. But I actually see our group as one company, but 4 different departments. And they all bring me different levels of joy and stress. But
that's pretty much the answer Ben gave, and I think it is the right answer. And it's true to form to a good entrepreneur. It's like babies and dogs. Like, you can't pick a favorite.
Yeah.
It's like, how am I supposed to pick my favorite kid? It's like they all give you different types of joy. I won't get you to elaborate any more into that, because I think that is the right answer. And I think that, but sometimes different people are on different journeys. I have spoken to people, and they have told me from time to time, it's like, look, this one I've already run as far as I can with it, and I've just fallen out of love with it completely. And actually, if I got an offer for it tomorrow, I'd probably sell it, because they're not children and they're not pets, but and they're assets that one day that you could move on. But I think you're still in that growth and that storm phase where everything's still quite exciting. So it doesn't surprise me that you are still emotionally attached to all of them. Now, the other question that I've got for you is what if you a younger self, what would you wish that you knew when you started? You've come such a long way in the time that you've been doing this. If you could tell yourself something from the start, what would that thing be?
I think I think I've talked about critical mass and where the business went. We always had the end in mind, but that changes, and I think that could have been looked at by someone that's been doing it longer. We only took a non-exec on a few years ago. We obviously had external advice from other people, but I think probably bringing someone else in that's been there, done that, stressed what we were doing, because otherwise you just have to learn it and do it and correct, and so that can save time. Another thing that I would say is probably just the whole like self-confidence piece. You realize that if you've got good common sense, good work ethic, good morals, I think you can be successful in any industry, and you probably will waste some of your time, even if you've made the jump to do a business venture or whatever it may be, because of confidence. And it does limit your growth and your capabilities. And, you say about, overnight success. I would have said that there was 6 years that I could have condensed down into 2 before, sort of transitioning from doing my own thing to working with Ben. So just having self-confidence, and you're only young once. I was fortunate that I started quite early. I was in property at 22 years old, which marks a decade in property for me. But I think just sort of allowing for a 22-year-old to be able to, take the bull by the horns and go give some things a go with the right guidance and team around them, because it isn't that difficult to run a successful business. The difficult part is the day-to-day, and if you don't know what you don't know, you sometimes get hung up on those day-to-day activities.
Yeah.
I'm almost like immune to like bad news and good news now because I'm just so used to it both. And back in the day, that would be very emotionally impacting. So just to sort of, I don't know how I could package that up as advice, but I guess it would probably come with rubbing shoulders with people that have been there, done that, and can share that wisdom.
What is the best advice that you've ever received?
It's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I've got loads of like cheesy.
Oh, we love a bit.
Taglines.
I've got literally like motivational quotes on this screensaver thing on my Google Chrome. Every day it gives me like a new quote that I just look at, and then I save them on a Google Doc, which I've got in my favorites, and I've got like this massive list of them.
Yeah.
And I literally just walk around like some sort of one of these little quote books of wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. There's various influential people in my life, and that's, might be someone on YouTube, to my dad or a family friend that's been successful. I've got some quite sort of raw ones with, grievances that we've had, and there's a quote from my dad's business partner, and that his leaving quote was really important. And that's all about not dwelling and moving on, and that sits with me because that really helps when shit gets real. What can you do about it? Move on. It's out of your control. Which brings me to one of my favourite phrases: only worry about what you can control, which has been sort of a stabiliser of my head in terms of times of turmoil. However much it appears from outline, we do go through some shit. My dad comes with some nuggets like, for an example, he said you've got to do the bulk of what you want to do before you're 40. And that gives me huge drive to get to a point where I'm 40 where it's a choice. I could keep going over.
What's the worst piece of advice you've ever had?
I've got, okay. So before I was in property and when I was still in sales, I was opening up a gym. I did a stint in health and fitness and blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I decided to not open the gym. I basically had everything lined up, business plan lined up, funding lined up, kit ordered, lease almost agreed on the space, planning permission on the building for the change of use, everything ready to go. I met with, this is again another bit of advice. I met with another gym owner that scaled a privately run gym business, almost knocking on the heels of Pure Gym, for an example, but privately run. And he just sort of said, the space isn't big enough. I don't think it'll work. I wouldn't do it if I were you. So I'm actually getting onto the bad advice, but that was good advice.
Right.
Because I didn't open up that gym. I packaged it up and sold it on to a guy that was an accountant who then ran it into the ground, and it didn't make a success. But that was a good bit of advice. But what this leads me on to is, in my business plan, I'm 21 years old. I've built the best business plan that I could build in my capabilities. I'd done a lot of research. I spent months on it, and I built a business plan. And I just thought, I'll tell you what, I'll send it to my parents' accountant, who my parents have been working with for years. And he came back.
Family accountant. I've got one of those.
And he basically came back and said, "This is terrible," and that's it.
Oh no.
And it's good in a way because it put a fire in my belly to prove him wrong, that I can build a business that has a business plan that can be successful. Maybe a bit of ego there, that more successful than him, but I'm over that now. But what really pissed me off is he actually played a huge part in my confidence as a 21-year-old looking at a 65-year-old accountant, when actually I think that business would have been, to some degree, what the gym owner was saying is, you're not going to build a business that works without you. And that's when I said, actually, I don't want to be in here every day. But it would have been a success, and I would have made it a success. So again, reverting back to confidence, that you've got to build on that. And I think that successful people around you will help you build that confidence, and unsuccessful people around you will help tarnish that.
I've just read a book. It's called Choose Your Enemies Wisely. Believe it or not, it's a business planning book. And because some enemies will break you if you choose the wrong one, because you're just going to drag you down and it's just going to be a waste of time. But some of them that actually put a fire in your belly and you go, right, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's kind of, I think, by the sound of it, that bit of advice that you got, or your mum got even, was in a roundabout way bad advice, but helped you out.
Yeah.
If you want to be successful in property, I think you have to have some characteristics, like some traits. You're obviously a successful property person. What traits does a successful property person need to have? Whether they're an investor, developer, property professional, what sort of characteristic traits do you think they need to have?
Evidently, we run a multitude of businesses, and our skills are spread between different of the businesses and where we're more skillful. I think it somewhat depends what you want to go into. I've seen people that are really good at marketing do really well in the co-living space, because it's all about the product, the feel, the sense when you walk in, the design on the walls. I've seen people from a finance background do well in development, because the biggest challenge in a development business is cash flow. So I think resourcefulness is certainly up there. I think work ethic in any business is pretty key, unless you're designing a mega chip that is in IT, and that's not my skill set. But in certainly running a business, or a service-based business, or a property business, I do think that there has to be work ethic there, depending on where your goals are. I think common sense is missed a lot.
It's not very common, is it?
Yeah, for an example, we communicate with a lot of other developers, and we go, "Why don't you push back on that?" And they said, "Well, I didn't really think of it." And I'm like, It's 30 grand you're leaving on the table there. One quick telephone conversation. What's the worst that happens? They say no, and you're still losing the 30 grand. So, so I do think there's more than other businesses. Common sense is really, really handy in property investment and property development. I do think that it is quite important you are comfortable with numbers, because at the end of the day, whether you're doing it with your own money or someone else's money, you do need to understand you're responsible for presenting that deal to yourself or to someone else. You can bring in resource for planning consultants, architects, for project managers, for quantity surveyors. You can pay for that, but you can't pay for you finding the deal, de-risking the deal, and then package that on to someone else. And then, sort of, I said, resourcefulness, common sense, work ethic. In our business, a lot of our business is built around partnerships, so morals is super important for us. We've actually not worked with some partners because we don't align with their morals. And then last but not least, I would say passion. I think that when time gets hard, if you don't have a passion for it, you're going to let down your investor partner, your team.
You're going to give up if you're staying anyway.
Exactly.
Why would you do something you don't enjoy?
So I was born on a building site, pretty much. I've lived up on building sites. I know it, I live and breathe it, and I feel that has put me in good stead, because a problem is always got 3 solutions rather than it being a big problem.
Solution driven. I love all those, and I think they are super helpful, and I hope that people take those away, because it's one of the reasons why I enjoy working with you as well. And if people wanted to reach out to you, I know that you do the stuff on a Friday with Ben, which I think is really, I was just speaking to somebody yesterday that watched it, and they were talking about how frank and open and honest and transparent you've been with, like, the good and the bad, on a weekly basis. It's almost like blow-by-blow accounts of what you guys go through building all this stuff. But if they want to reach out to you and find out more about what you're up to, what's the best way they can catch you?
So all of our businesses are on, you can obviously find our websites, so XP Property, XP Surveys, Central Suites, and Apara Social, and then Ben's architecture practice, Aura Architecture. So all of our websites, if you Google us, hopefully we're the first, otherwise our SEO is getting sacked. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, just Jack Jiggens. Believe it or not, I was called Jack Chickens the other day, which isn't the first time. And yeah, you can, if anyone found any of this and has a question, reach out to me. I'm always happy to give up some of my time, because I've had a lot of people on my journey that have done that for me.
And I'd highly recommend anybody that does want to reach out, because I know you've helped a lot of people as well that I speak to. Thank you very much for your time. We'll make it a trilogy at some point in the near future. Cheers, Jack.
Cheers, Sam.